U.S. vetoes UN resolution on Israel-Hamas war. Washington in limbo as House marks 15th day without Speaker. You're watching World Today with me, Otto Othman. The United States vetoed a UN Security Council resolution on Wednesday calling for a humanitarian pause in the raging Israel-Hamas conflict. 12 out of 15 council members voted in favor of the resolution put forward by Brazil and negotiated over several days, while Russia and the United Kingdom abstained. The United States was the only vote against, claiming the text did not respect Israel's right to defend itself. As one of the body's 5 permanent members, its vote counts as a veto.
Sadly, very sadly, the Council was yet again unable to adopt a resolution on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Again, silence and inaction prevailed.
Только что мы с вами стали свидетелями очередного проявления лицемерия и двойных стандартов наших американских коллег. С самого начала, не выступая в принципе против идеи принятия гуманитарной резолюции Совбеза, они на самом деле не были в ней заинтересованы и лишь рассчитывали выкрутить необходимое для непрохождения проекта без их вето числа рук. Поскольку это в итоге не удалось.
The vote comes after the Security Council on Monday rejected a Russian resolution condemning spiraling violence in the West Asia. The Palestinian Authority wants an investigation by the International Criminal Court, ICC, into the deadly strike on a Gaza hospital that Israelis and Palestinians are accusing each other of. This was announced by the ambassador of Palestine to France, Hala Abu Hassari.
Il faut donner mandat, il faut renforcer la Cour pénale internationale pour entamer son enquête pour les crimes de guerre et les crimes contre l'humanité. Il faut une enquête internationale, mais Israël reste le seul responsable, le premier responsable de crimes, de massacres qui a eu lieu hier et de tous les massacres qui sont perpétrés depuis 75 ans.
Abu Hassira also urged for France to play a constructive role in setting up the ICC investigation, stop the aggression and to lift the blockade on Gaza and allow access for humanitarian aid, which is the responsibility of Israel, the occupying force. Egypt President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi yesterday said that the Egyptians in their millions would reject the forced displacement of Palestinians into Sinai, adding that any such move would turn the Egyptian peninsula into a base for attacks against Israel. Egypt has been alarmed at the idea that Israel's unprecedented bombardment and siege of Gaza, home to 2.3 million people, could force its residents southwards into Sinai. In joint press conference in Cairo with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, the Gaza Strip is effectively under Israeli control, and Palestinians could instead move to Israel's Negev desert.
إذن فكرة النزوح أو تهجير الفلسطينيين من القطاع إلى مصر معناه ببساطة أنه هيحدث أيضا أمر مماثل، هو تهجير الفلسطينيين من الضفة إلى الأردن، وبالتالي يبقى فكرة الدولة الفلسطينية اللي احنا بنتكلم عليها واللي المجتمع الدولي كله بيتكلم عليها غير قابلة للتنفيذ.
Later, following a phone call between Sisi and U.S. President Joe Biden, a White House spokesman said about 20 trucks carrying humanitarian aid would enter Gaza from Egypt's Sinai Peninsula in the coming days. Gaza, reeling under Israel's constant bombardment, needs huge amounts of humanitarian aid of around 100 trucks per day. UN's Emergency Relief Coordinator Martin Griffiths said this to the media hours after U.S. President Joe Biden said he had received Israeli assurances that aid would come in through the Rafah border crossing on the Gaza-Egypt border at the southern end of the Gaza Strip. He said he hoped that within the next couple of days, the essential program of aid could start, noting the UN, including its Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees Development Agency, has some 14,000 staff in the Strip to aid with distribution. Taking also into account colleagues from the Red Crescent aid organization, Griffiths in Cairo negotiating with Egyptian authorities said they have the resources to do so. Tons of aid remain for the time being blocked in the Sinai Desert, with the Rafah crossing on the Palestinian side closed following 4 bombardments this week. Griffiths stressed that the aid would go to the civilian population and not to Hamas, which controls Gaza, home to 2.4 million people. Meanwhile, the people of Gaza continue their daily struggle to get fresh water amid shortages following the relentless bombardment campaign of the Gaza Strip that has flattened neighborhoods, leaving survivors with dwindling supplies of food, water and fuel.
الوضع صعب جدا ولا ميه ولا كهرباء ولا اكل ولا شرب زي ما انت شايف نايمين على الارض وعلى الحصوه حتى كمان الميه ميه مالحه عندك اطفال بيشربوا حليب بنعملهم الميه المالحه هذا خطر عليهم بنغسل وعينا بنشرب ميه المالحه ولا اكل ولا شرب يعني بالمره الحياه صعبه جدا نفسي تخلص الحرب على خير ما حدش يتضرر منها كل واحد يرجع لبيته احسن ترجع حياته زي ما كانت.
At least 100 protesters occupied a building of the U.S. Congress on Wednesday, urging lawmakers and Joe Biden's administration to push for a ceasefire in Gaza, which has been under Israeli airstrikes. Dressed in black T-shirts emblazoned with the words, "Jews say cease fire now," and "Not in our name," the activists sat clapping and singing on the floor in the rotunda of the Cannon House office building and held up a large banners that read "Ceasefire" and "Let Gaza live." Capitol Police said protests are not allowing inside the building and several demonstrators were arrested.
Biden's visit to Israel today is shameful and abhorrent. Over the last 10 days, we have seen the Israeli government and the Israeli military drop over 6,000 bombs on 2 million Palestinians living in one of the most densely populated places on the planet. That is more bombs than the U.S. dropped on Afghanistan in a year.
Over in Europe, thousands marched in solidarity with the Palestinian people in Greece's capital, Athens, in a protest that culminates at the Israeli embassy, where a cordon of riot police briefly fired tear gas at protesters who get too close and bang on their shields. In Portugal, hundreds gathered in Lisbon to demonstrate their solidarity with the Palestinian people and to call for peace in the West Asia. The rally comes a day after the deaths of hundreds of people in a strike on Gaza hospital for which Israel and Hamas have traded the blame.
Nós temos que combater esta situação que não pode continuar. A situação da Palestina é simplesmente inaceitável. Em qualquer ponto de vista que nós queiramos ter, portanto, é inaceitável. Nós temos que, pelo menos, manifestar o nosso protesto para ver se aquilo acaba finalmente. É preciso haver paz, é fundamental que haja paz na Palestina. E também em Israel, obviamente, para que possam aqueles povos do Médio Oriente, pelo menos naquela zona do planeta, viverem dignamente e com paz. É o que é preciso, é fundamental.
Racista de apartheid, de subjugação.
France's Justice Minister vowed to crack down on the little jokers behind a flurry of false bomb alerts that caused chaos at airports and tourist sites on Wednesday. Emailed threats of attack combined with abandoned luggage scares to trigger evacuations at multiple airports including Lille, Lyon, Nantes, Nice, Toulouse and Beauvais near Paris, leading to hours of delays. The situation had returned to normal at all airports by early evening. The Palace of Versailles, a major tourist attraction outside Paris, was evacuated for the third time since Saturday for bomb disposal teams to check the site. Justice Minister Eric Dupond-Moretti said the little jokers behind the false alerts would be found and punished. He said they will be punished and their parents will be required to reimburse the damages they have caused if they are minors. France is on high alert following the Israeli-Hamas war and Friday's fatal stabbing of a teacher at a school in the northern city of Arras by a man claiming allegiance to the Daesh group. The school was evacuated due to a bomb alert on Monday, just as a minute's silence for the murdered teacher was due to be held, while the Louvre Museum was also evacuated on Saturday due to a bomb threat. Still to come, Argentina to boost reserves with China currency swap. Stay tuned.
Beli!
Betul lah, Shopee ada penghantaran percuma.
Kena berbayar kalau dapat penghantaran percuma di Shopee. Beli sekarang di Shopee.
Thank you for staying with us. U.S. lawmakers rejected hardline conservative Jim Jordan's bid for Speaker of the House of Representatives for a second time yesterday as the leadership vacuum paralyzed Washington for a 15th day with no clear resolution in sight. The lower chamber of Congress has been in a tailspin since Republican Speaker Kevin McCarthy was ousted by his party's far right on 3rd October. Leaving it unable to address a looming government shutdown or war in the West Asia. Jordan, an acolyte of scandal-engulfed Donald Trump, could only afford to lose 4 Republican votes, but 22 of his colleagues rejected his candidacy in the second ballot, 2 more than were against him a day earlier. The Israel-Hamas conflict, a renewed push for aid to Ukraine, and the threat of a government shutdown have dramatically upped the stakes, with Republicans hoping the urgent need for Congress to respond would unite the fractured party. But Jordan's centrist colleagues, already wary of a hard-right politics, voiced irritation over a certain effort to whip extra votes for the 59-year-old former wrestling champion. Argentina and China have agreed to expand a currency swap that will allow Buenos Aires to boost its dwindling foreign reserves by $6.5 billion, as stated by President Alberto Fernandez on Wednesday. Now, Latin America's third biggest economy is just days away from a presidential election, with voters' anxiety sparking a run on the peso, long propped up by government and great cost. Argentina's central bank reserves are at $24 billion. However, analysts estimate net reserves are in the red by $5 billion. The central bank has fixed the peso exchange to 365 to the dollar, but the currency briefly crashed to 1,000 to the dollar on the thriving informal market last week after presidential frontrunner, the radical liberation Javier Milei, said the peso isn't worth excrement. Milei, who has vowed to ditch the peso for the US dollar if he wins, will face off against Economy Minister Sergio Massa and conservative Patricia Bullrich in Sunday's first-round election. Campaigns have centered on Argentina's latest economic woes, with annual inflation at 138% and some 40% of the population now living in poverty. Now, Russian lawmakers yesterday voted once more to revoke Moscow's ratification of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, moving the country another step closer to abandoning the landmark agreement. The 1996 treaty outlaws all nuclear explosions, including live tests of nuclear weapons, but it has never come into force because some key countries, including the United States and China, have not ratified the treaty. In a fast-track hearing in the State Duma Wednesday, lawmakers voted unanimously to revoke Russia's ratification of the treaty in a combined second and third reading of the bill. The initiative will next be voted on by Russia's upper house, the Federation Council, before being sent to President Vladimir Putin to sign into law. Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rabkov told reporters last week that Moscow would only resume nuclear tests if the United States did so first. Although it never entered into force, the agreement has been ratified by 178 countries, including nuclear powers France and Britain, and has symbolic value. Putin has repeatedly invoked Russia's nuclear doctrine since launching a full-scale offensive in Ukraine in February 2022, triggering Western accusations of reckless nuclear rhetoric. In September last year, Putin said he was not bluffing about his readiness to use destructive weapons should Russia face an existential threat.
Austria's former Chancellor Sebastian Kurz said he was innocent as he went on trial for allegedly giving false testimony in the latest corruption scandal to rock the EU member. Kurz is the highest profile figure implicated in a series of scandals, and the case marks the first time in more than 30 years that a former Chancellor has stood trial.
Once hailed as a wonder kid of Europe's conservatives, Kurz stepped down as Chancellor 2 years ago, following a string of graft accusations including spending public money for favorable media coverage. It marked a spectacular fall for the charismatic hardliner who became the world's youngest democratically elected head of government in 2017 at the age of 31. Kurz went on trial for allegedly providing false testimony in 2020 to a parliamentary committee, probing numerous graft allegations. The 37-year-old said he hopes for a fair process and that in the end, the accusations will be proven wrong, entering the courtroom. Dressed in a light shirt and dark suit, he slammed a politicization of his case and said he was confident he would be acquitted. If found guilty, Kurz could face up to 3 years in jail.
Some 130 Venezuelan migrants arrived back home Wednesday on a chartered plane from the United States on the first such deportation flight following an agreement between the two non-friendly governments.
The flight from Texas arrived at the Simon Bolivar International Airport in Caracas, bearing adult men and women traveling alone with no families. Until the agreement this month between the White House and President Nicolas Maduro, whose 2018 re-election Washington does not recognize, Venezuelan migrants were deported on commercial flights. Small numbers at a time mixed in with ordinary passengers. This was the first plane since the deal that was chartered for the sole purpose of returning a large group of migrants to Venezuela. The agreement provides for the orderly, safe, and legal repatriation of undocumented Venezuelan migrants. The dozens on Wednesday's first flight climbed the steps to the plane one by one, with chains on their ankles and wrists that were removed once on board. All wore face masks, their meager belongings packed into white and orange plastic bags.
Now, the Colombian government started talks with FARC dissidents who had rejected the guerrilla group's in 2016 peace pact with the view to demobilizing some 3,500 fighters and putting an end, once and for all, to their armed insurgency.
Negotiations between the government of President Gustavo Petro and leaders of the so-called Central General Staff, or EMC, kicked off in Tibu in the country's northeast, an area surrounded by drug crops and hard hit by ongoing violence. According to the Defense Ministry, the parties also agreed to observe a bilateral ceasefire until 15th January next year. Hours before negotiators gathered, Petro wrote on X, formerly Twitter, that Colombia hoped to deliver a message of peace to the world. Petro took office last August with a vow to bring total peace to a country battered by decades of civil conflict between the state and various left-wing guerrilla groups, right-wing paramilitaries, and drug traffickers. On his initiative, the government wants to give the dissident a second chance to lay down arms after rejecting the 2016 peace agreement with the Evolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC, of which they were then a part. The deal saw about 7,000 FARC fighters give up arms and attempt to reintegrate into civil society.
Now, Uganda said Wednesday it was hunting down gunmen who killed a honeymoon couple and their safari guide in one of the country's famed national parks in an attack claimed by the Daesh group. President Yoweri Museveni condemned what he described as quote-unquote cowardly act and vowed the assailants would pay with their lives.
Police said a Briton and a South African were killed along with their Ugandan guide in Tuesday's attack and blamed an IS-linked armed militia based in the neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo, or DRC. The Daesh claimed responsibility in a statement released on Wednesday, saying the attackers had killed 3 Christian tourists, one of them a Briton, with machine guns. Police and park officials said the trio were targeted by the attackers in Queen Elizabeth National Park in southwestern Uganda, and their vehicles set ablaze. Britain issued a warning to citizens against traveling to the park, while France also told its nationals to be prudent. The popular park is rich in wildlife across its 1,800 square kilometers, including lions with an unusual ability to climb trees. Next in sports, Jia advances to second stage of Denmark Open. Stay with us. Now we begin with badminton. National ace shuttler Jia was made to toil to advance into the second round of the Denmark Open and survived an early scare against 56th ranked Julian Karagi. Jia won in a rubber set action against the Belgian 19-21, 21-15, 21-10. The Arctic Open champion got off to a wobbly start in the first set as he seemed to stutter even though he had the lead at some point. However, all of that was cast off in the second set and decider as Jia came roaring back. He convincingly took the second set 21-15 before putting the result beyond doubt with an overwhelming 21-10 win in the decider. Jia's real test, however, will come in the second round today when he takes on world number 1 Victor Axelsen of Denmark. Unfortunately, it was not so smooth sailing for another national men's singles shuttler, Ng Ziyong, as he made an early exit. The world number 17 failed to progress after he went down to China's Lu Guangzhou 18-21, 11-21. Meanwhile, national men's doubles pair Man Wei Chong, T Kai Woon suffered an early exit in the Denmark Open. They were eliminated by Japanese duo Akira Koga, Taichi Saito in straight sets 18-21, 16-21. The pair, ranked world number 19, managed to put up some resistance but was ultimately defeated in 40 minutes. However, the Japanese pair in the second round are set to face another Malaysian duo, Teo Yi, Ong Yu Sin. Yu Sin and Yi reached the second round without having to lift their rackets after their first round opponents, newly crowned Asian Games champions and world number 1 pair, Satwik Sairaj Rankireddy, Chirag Shetty of India, conceded a walkover. In the second round of the Denmark Open later in the evening, men's doubles ace pair Aaron Chia, So Wei will face a demanding task to book a slot in the quarterfinals. They are set to face 3-time world champions Muhammad Ahsan, Hendra Setiawan from Indonesia. The Spanish court yesterday said Barcelona president Joan Laporta has been charged as part of the investigation into alleged bribes paid to referees. Now, the club itself and 2 of its former presidents, Josep Maria Bartomeu and Sandro Rosell, as well as the former head of Spain's referees body, Jose Maria Enriquez Negreira, and his son have already been charged. Laporta has been charged in relation to his first spell as president of Barcelona from 2003 to 2010. The 61-year-old, who returned to the presidency for a second time in 2021, was not initially named as defendant when charges of alleged bribery were filed against Barca in September. In his report published on Wednesday, the judge leading the investigation said, in his opinion, Laporta could not defend from the statute of limitations because of the seriousness of the accusations. Negreira allegedly earned over 7 million euros, equivalent to about $7.5 million from Barcelona between 2001 and 2018, through companies for supposedly producing refereeing reports for the club. Barcelona, the 27-time Spanish champions, have been fighting off accusations for months and deny any wrongdoing. Laporta had said the payments were for technical reports about referees and has repeatedly denied the club has ever bought referees or influence.
League One side Nice suspended Algerian international Youssef Attal until further notice on Wednesday after he shared a post on social media linked to the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Even though he quickly deleted the post and apologized, the club said in a press release that given the seriousness of the post, it was taking immediate disciplinary action prior to any action that may be taken by the supporting and legal authorities.
Attal was called into a meeting with the club hierarchy following his return from international duty with Algeria, during which period he made the post. The 27-year-old has been widely criticized by French football officials, politicians, a Jewish group and the mayor of Nice since Saturday for sharing posts on Instagram showing support to the Palestinians. The parties have all condemned the message, which Attal deleted before apologizing. The Nice prosecutor's office confirmed in a statement it was investigating Attal under relevant laws after being notified of local politicians. The prosecutor said police would also assess if the post amounted to incitement of religious hatred or violence. The French Football Federation, FFF, has not committed since saying on Sunday its ethics committee would investigate the player. Attal responded to the criticism, telling his Instagram followers he would, quote-unquote, never support a message of hate.
Piala Malaysia 2023, kesebelasan utama kini bersedia bagi memburu tahta terpulang bola sepak Malaysia.
Dorongannya begitu mudah, Malaysia mengambil masanya.
Khamis, 19 Oktober, perlawanan separuh akhir Berita FC bertemu Johor Darul Takzim 8.30 malam di saluran OK. Saksikan juga secara penstreaman langsung di RTM Klik.